Welcome back to part 3 of how essential oils can, or and what, how and what essential oils can help us to transmute unproductive conflict in our experience. And let's see which one wants to go next. We're going to go with neroli. Neroli, Angelix incarnate. One of the beauties of neroli is that it does remind us, and through, seemingly like the choir of angels. I often, when I'm working with neroli, will hear, like psychically hear, this, what I've come to call the choir of angels. It is the sound of the angelic realms, which to me, who knows exactly what that is? I don't honestly totally know, but I know that it's real. I know that it's an aspect of experience that we can tap into, and neroli is one that helps us to. Prayer is another one that helps us to. And that we can receive a very needed and important gift of grace and of the embodiment of compassion. To find union with ourselves as the embodiment of compassion, like Mother Mary or Kuan Yin energy. So neroli brings us into contact with our own divinity, but in the flesh, which means that we are coming into our own divinity without denying in any way, shape, or form our carnal nature. That's a phrase for you. Our carnal nature, our embodied nature. The fact that we're a messy, imperfect human in process who eats and poops and has urges and, gets out of balance and gets into balance, and that no part of that, what I just named, no part of that is not divine. Double negative there. Let's say it a different way. All parts of ourselves, the pooping, messy part with urges and, gluttonous desires, like all of that is within the realm of the divine, because we are divine, infinite spiritual essences manifest in human form, here now on planet Earth. My discovery of this particular feature of neroli that I want to share with you was deeply profound and connected directly when I originally experienced it to religious shame, embodied religious shame, shame and guilt around sex, shame and guilt around sexuality, shame and guilt around urges. Whether you were raised religious or not, you were, I can't think of any place on the planet, perhaps maybe deep in the jungles of the Amazon, but in most developed and even semi-developed places, you have strong currents of some form of religious conditioning. And no matter what the religion is, I travel a lot. I've stayed extended periods of time in different places of the world where Hinduism is dominant, where Buddhism is dominant, where Christianity, where Catholicism is dominant. And every single one of those religions comes with its own set of baggage around, I'll just call it Puritanism, to keep it simple, like this divide. And it's a conflict, mind you, a conflict between what's allowed and what's not allowed, what's pure and what's impure, what's holy and what's unholy. And so we all have this embodied, practiced movement between these two ends of the spectrum that are fraught with distortion, as I've been calling it, distortion. So when I say distortion, by the way, I just mean that when something gets distorted, it's getting twisted and skewed in one direction. In the world of duality and polarity, part of the genius of it is it's meant to move with fluidity. It's meant to move with fluidity. And when we go into distortion or pathology, it's because we got stuck somewhere and everything's getting twisted out of proportion. All of these oils that I'm sharing with you in this series, by the way, their main piece is to help draw us out of this fundamental conflict or unnatural pathological push-pull between opposites. Neroli's gift is to pull us out of the distortions and polarity that get locked into place because of guilt and shame. Heavy. This is heavy. It's deep, it's heavy, it's real. When it comes to seeing conflict outside of ourselves, I just had the sweetest engagement the other day with some fellow colleagues and oil lovers. Just such a beautiful group of women who are in Russia right now. And I think one of the very destructive features of externalized conflict is that we tend to make sweeping generalizations. You know, this person bad and this person good, this country wrong and this country right, you know, these kinds of things. And the truth is, within the complexity of the human experience, those kinds of sweeping generalizations never hold up. I say this because here I think most most people really feel their heart going out to the Ukrainians because of the nature of this conflict. And of course I do. And I simultaneously feel my heart going out to the Russians. You know, the people that are in the midst of very active conflict that is being propagated through legacy institutions and overstructures, governmental structures. There are so many layers to that. I'll just call it ickiness. There's so many layers to that ickiness that we won't go into those here. But the thread that I want to pull out is this thread of guilt and shame. We could feel shameful for, I'm going to now bring this back to the individual. We could feel ashamed for being ourselves. We could feel ashamed for not performing up to speed. We could feel ashamed for not being like them. We could feel ashamed for doing something that we feel is stupid or not good enough. We can feel ashamed for any number of things. It's a bottomless pit, you know. We can feel guilty for not saying or not doing or not being. And both guilt and shame, they can only stay locked into our experience if we stay identified with just that fragmented part of the self. For example, if I say, I feel ashamed for, let me just feel one in my own experience. I'm going to tell you one that's very real. This is one of the most extreme experiences of shame that one of the tops of my life. I was in a private Christian elementary school that was very strict. And I cheated. I can laugh now, but I cheated on a Bible test. It was a memorization of a chapter in Corinthians. And the irony is I had memorized almost the whole chapter. This was this last segment I was supposed to memorize, and I chose to stay up late with my mom and make pies and not memorize it. And then I devised this plan to cheat the next day. I thought it was genius. I got caught. I got sent to the principal's office. She said a lot of intense things that, while perhaps they maybe weren't intentionally meant to shame me, they were very shaming, highly shaming. Shame is what I overtook my entire experience. And she said, I'm going to call your dad and you're going to tell him what you've done. I'm going to call your father. And that just it ripped me into shreds, just ripped me. There was something deeply, deeply painful about this thought of telling my father that I had done this and what he would think of me. So she went out of the room to get my father's phone number, and I seriously contemplated taking my own life right there. There was a pair of scissors, and the pain was so unbearable, the shame was so unbearable, that I tried to stab myself in the chest. So I'm like 9 years old or something. I don't know, whatever fifth grade is. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get up the momentum to hurt myself like that. So then I thought I just have to run away and stay away forever. I can't bear this. I can't bear this. I can't bear this. So I was going to get out the window, and I couldn't get out the window before she came back in the room. So this shame was all locked around this identity of Tiffany as a cheater and everything that's connected to a bad person, a bad woman, a blah, 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 blah. So shame requires a lift into a bigger truth or a fuller truth of our identity. A fuller truth of our identity. In this case, Neroli is bringing us into the divinity of our identity. And when we align with the divinity of our identity, it's like the illumination, the light of the heavens is how I like to think about it. It just burns away. It burns away any of that stuff. Once light illuminates, it burns away. It transmutes the heaviness, the stickiness, the boogeriness, the density of shame. And guilt is another one where we are, guilt is a big topic as well, but a couple of things I want to mention here is that we are taking on or assuming a negative responsibility for something that's not actually ours, or we are overcompensating with an internal or external blame for some reason. We're overcompensating. Shame tends to accumulate energetically in the pelvic bowl. If you want to understand more about the dynamics of shame in the pelvic bowl, because it's a big deal and a big topic, it's an important topic, I have a course. It's actually called, I have two because I'm thinking of them right now. One is like an introduction into pelvic care with essential oils. I think that's what it's called. And the other one is called Tending the Pelvic Bowl, which is a more complete offering with aroma point therapy. Those are both on Master Healer Academy. And both of them go into a lot more depth about shame within the pelvis and how to work with it with aroma point therapy. I want to share with you a sweet technique right now with Neroli. Before I go there, let's also say, so I don't forget, that guilt tends to accumulate in the chest or affect more of the chest, even though they move around. Shame can tend to kind of come up like a shame bomb, I call it, and infiltrate the chest and up into the head. And guilt can also descend down into the pelvis, and we can sort of hold it in there like a little secret. When I work with Neroli, there's a few different points that I like to use. Sometimes if I'm wanting to just activate that divinity incarnate or angelics incarnate, I will put it right on the top of my head. That's point GV20, 100 meetings, connecting us with the higher realms, right at the top of the head. So you find the high point of the ear and you go right to the top of the head there. But the technique that I'm going to share with you, particularly in light of this conversation of conflict, is taking a drop of the Neroli, and I use a 15% strength, by the way. You could use 100%, but it's quite... well, first of all, it's expensive and it's not really necessary to use 100%. So you take a drop divided between two fingers, and then you're going to put one here at the suprasternal notch. There's a little notch there between the two clavicle bones. And this helps to transmute and transform the energy of the things that we've swallowed down, where we've closed off our voice and also our creative expression because of how we felt guilty or ashamed. And then you take your other finger and you can put it over that CV4 gate of origin point, which I talked about in the last section with Clary Sage. So you're holding both of those. You're addressing the descending and ascending activity of the lungs and of the guilt movements, and then the shame eddies, I call them, or sort of backflows of energy that tend to accumulate in the pelvis from shame cycles. Light touch, hold 1 to 3 minutes until you feel a shift. bring your hands up and inhale. And if you really feel neroli working with you, like the power of it in your experience, do this every day for some days. Do it for 5 days, 7 days, even in a row. It will entrain your body into a different way of being. That's part of the beauty. All right, much love to you from my heart to yours, and I'll see you in the last and final part where we get into marjoram, the great pacifier.